The title that I took for this week's message is actually a passage from Paul's letter to the Hebrews. And it was at a time that they were wondering, because they've been waiting and expecting Jesus to come back in their own lifetimes. And so they were wondering about faith, and they were wondering about hope. So it's certainly the perfect title for this Remembrance Sunday. Faith is being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see. As for myself, I can say with certainty that there's not a single person here right now or watching us online who hasn't ever been touched by the loss of someone that they loved. It was the great theologian Soren Kierkegaard who understood that what makes grief hurt so badly in such a profound level. He pointed out that when we lose a loved one, what we are truly mourning is the image of ourselves without the other. As my Yale Divinity colleague, Dr. David Westcott, says of this thought, someone who's deeply loved becomes a part of ourselves. I think you can understand that with these wonderful people you put on the tree. They become a part of ourselves, and the loss of them can leave a gaping wound in our soul, an empty space that we yearn to have filled. We are sure that we have all known such grief. Perhaps we think it's a grief we can never get over, but with the help of God, it is, as he says, a grief that we can get through. The problem is, joyful holidays, like the ones we're going through and starting now, make no room for that which isn't joyful, namely, mourning. It's as if the Thanksgiving and Christmas season can't stand to acknowledge that right now, whether the loss is new or years old, a good number of us see the absence of a place setting at the table this year. What's going on right now in the world, which we all know so vividly, only magnifies that sense of loss. I know that found that to be very true for me. Sarah Wildman, and I assume no relationship, Sarah Wildman is a staff writer for the New York Times opinion page. And it's not surprising that in the last week she chose that week to write a piece that's called "The Empty Seat at Our Thanksgiving Table." She's a grieving mother herself. 6 months ago, she, her husband, and their daughter, Hannah, older daughter Hannah, lost Orly, their daughter who was only age 14, to metastasized liver cancer, unexpected and very fast. Like someone who has had their very reason for living ripped away suddenly, every moment of the day for Sarah reminds Sarah of Orly, what she used to cook that was Orly's favorite, the empty seat in the back of the car. As she says, with the violence and hostage situation in Gaza running constantly on our TV screens, the weeping and terror of that raining down on both Palestinians and families alike makes her relive the loss of Orly again and again. She notes the progression that's taken place as months have passed now since Orly died. She says, the notes and text messages from friends slow and stop, but her absence drones on. Living in loss is heavy. It is made more so by a world overflowing with grief and parental pain. I see myself in all those newly minted members of my terrible club. Recently, she came upon a note that her daughter Orly had written and hidden in her desk drawer for her to find later. Those of you who are in Bible study will know that the name Ima means mommy. And this was the note that Sarah found in her desk. I love you, Emma, no matter what. I love you, Emma, no matter what. Sarah notes how the family has fundamentally been rewired. The family is rewired, and as humans, they've been rewired. Even through the grief, they were grateful for this Thanksgiving, of having had the chance to know this kind of love, even in its pain. Which brings us back to the potent message in the letter to Hebrews. Whether the loss you remember is recent or long gone, it is not knowing how to handle the pain of grief that makes us want to forget. But as Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, the expert on death and dying, said, we believe with all our hearts that even in death our loved one still exists. Reverend Westcott noted that he really believes in this to be true, not just in memory, but also that those we love dearly become a part of us. When he looks in the mirror, he says, for a brief flash, he sees his father staring back at him. For many of us, we are haunted by the realization that there were things that were undone or that were unsaid to our loved ones. I'm proud to have seen a number of our members who've lost people in the recent months take the time to go and say the words that need to be said before someone passes away. But for a lot of people, we just agonize over these things. But Reverend Westcott says, given our thoughts on the afterlife, who's to say our loved ones cannot hear us from the grave? He tells a story of a woman that, from his youth that he once loved. This is a story of a woman of his youth that he once loved, and whose unexpected death he learned about just suddenly. And the night after he was told about this, she appeared to him in a dream, as if to confirm that what was left unspoken between them was now understood. God is the conduit. God is the conduit through which we remain connected to those who have gone on before us. Faith is being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see. When I think about it, it's quite amazing to me that we have a hard time believing in that which we do not see. One of these dark nights, when you get a chance, go out and look at this, up at this, at the sky, at the constellations and the galaxies, and realize that all the visible universe you see was at its creation, formed from the invisible. Could it be that our faith can be the underpinning for knowing God's handiwork, including ourselves and those we love, and that we have an infinite and immortal soul? We know what we hope for. That reunion we thirst for will take place beyond this life. So today, when we remember so many of us who we believe will be waiting for us one day, and even maybe it's even looking in on us now and then. I know I do. It's not accidental that the remembrance days that we do, which some churches call Blue Sundays, occur at the darkest time of the year. After all, when you think about it, darkness makes up a big part of the Christmas story. Reverend Ben Stewart is a professor of theology in Chicago at the Lutheran School of Theology, and he says that darkness has always been a part of that story. So he says there's a sense at Christmas that God's own self identifies with that sort of aloneness and darkness and comes to be with people Stewart says it's cold and dark, but the theological realities, how to acknowledge the darkness and fragile light. How do we hold together the kind of wonder of that infant child, that little infant child, and still make sure we're challenging the Herods of the world, which we know all too well these days, the Herods that would oppress children. All of us will be touched by darkness if we're not living in it right now at its deepest level. I think the Christmas Gospels tell the story of God's entrance into this world from the underside. And when all of us gather together and the marginalized are in the center, that's the promise of Christmas. Beyond our moments of remembrance today, we also reserve some time right after this message for sharing a healing blessing. And I will come down, and anyone who wants to come forward will receive a direct blessing from me, private. We need to remember there's a difference between healing and curing. Not every person or situation can be cured, but virtually all of us have things in our health and our lives that can be made more whole. Well, when I invite any of you who want to come forward to do so, I'm just the conduit between you and God's grace. I'm not the one giving the grace. I'm just the pass-through. The other part of healing is that you must want to be healed. In the gospel, when the paralytic man we read about 2 weeks ago, when he finally made his way to Jesus in the healing pool, Jesus asked him what sounds like a weird question. He said, "Do you want to be healed?" That's not such a strange question if you think about it. We can want and not want to be healed at the same time. When you're living with your affliction for a long, long time, it becomes a routine. It's predictable. It's comfortable. No one expects anything from you. But when you can walk and can see, there are expectations. Getting up and walking with Jesus may make life harder, but in ways that matter, Jesus says to the man, "Stand up, take your mat and walk." Ironically, when the man is healed and stands up carrying his mat, a week later, he is in trouble with the temple priests for violating the Sabbath because carrying a mat is working on the Sabbath. You can't win. So the question remains for us all. Are you willing to walk with Jesus and perform those acts of kindness that are mentioned in the gospel today, that the sheep of Jesus' flock performed out of their commitment to him? These acts of grace were in themselves invisible to the people who received the blessing, but not to Jesus. He knows that they are not blind to seeing his face in the face of every person we meet on our journey. And when it comes down to it, their acts were making Jesus to be a presence once again in this world, this sad and sorry world. Are we willing to walk with Jesus? Amen.